At exactly 7:45 a.m. on a crisp autumn morning at Heathrow Airport, a scene unfolded that would forever alter the lives of those on board Nimbus Air Flight 2187. Sebastian Cole, a quiet yet determined figure, whose calm demeanor belied the tempest of emotions within, found himself at the center of an incident that rippled far beyond his own fate. For years, Sebastian had built his empire behind the scenes as the unassuming founder of Cole Global Holdings, a company that underpinned vital technology across the aviation industry. Yet on this particular day, in the heart of one of the world's busiest airports, everything changed. Sebastian was not the type to seek attention. In his simple navy blazer and well-worn black trousers, he blended effortlessly with the morning crowd. His plain leather briefcase and the subtle gleam of his understated silver watch were a testament to his modesty despite his vast influence. He had arrived at the terminal 2 hours early, a habit he had developed to ensure everything was in perfect order before each journey. As he strolled through the concourse with a measured pace, his mind was quietly orchestrating the myriad plans that would one day rewrite a broken system. Without warning, the calm of that routine morning shattered. Airport security, in a manner that was both sudden and utterly bewildering, approached Sebastian with stern expressions. The voice of a uniformed officer rang out with clipped urgency, "Sir, please gather your belongings." A small crowd began to gather near the boarding gate as curiosity turned into hushed whispers and smartphones raised to capture every moment. In that tense instant, the careful balance between order and chaos collapsed, transforming an ordinary flight into a moment of public reckoning. Sebastian's face remained impassive as he complied. His eyes, however, betrayed a flicker of inner resolve, a silent promise that this moment, though forced upon him, would not define his worth or his mission. Unlike the flamboyant figures one might expect in such scenarios, he had always prided himself on his dignified restraint. Yet, as he was gently but firmly escorted from the flight by 2 security officers, the weight of everything he had endured, the quiet battles against systemic injustice, the countless nights spent strategizing for a fairer industry, crystallized in that moment. As he walked down the jet bridge, the echo of his measured steps contrasted sharply with the cacophony of disapproving murmurs from fellow travelers. Some voices, laced with bitterness and prejudice, could be heard. "They're always getting special treatment," one onlooker sneered, while another muttered in hushed tones about "people who think they're above the rules." These casual, yet potent, remarks distilled years of societal biases that had long festooned the fabric of air travel. For Sebastian, their words stung, not because they were entirely unexpected, but because they affirmed an insidious pattern he had fought silently for years. Outside the gate, the early morning light cast long shadows on the polished floor of the terminal. Amid the swirl of activity, Sebastian sought a quiet corner by a large window that overlooked the tarmac. There, away from the glare of judgmental eyes, he allowed himself a moment of introspection. His mind raced with the implications of this public spectacle, the viral potential of today's incident and the unforeseen consequences that such exposure might trigger. He knew that any form of public record, however unintentional, could serve as a catalyst for change. In this unremarkable act of being removed from a flight, a story of discrimination and silent resistance was about to be told. The scene was already transforming into a spectacle of its own. Onlookers began to record the unfolding drama on their phones, capturing every measured step, every whispered comment, every exchange of glances between security staff and passengers. Within minutes, the images would splatter across social media feeds, igniting debates and inflaming passions in ways no one could have predicted. For Sebastian, the irony was bitterly poetic. The very moment he had always tried to remain invisible as a discreet titan of industry was now rendering him visible, undesirably visible, in a storm of racial bias and corporate hypocrisy. The incident, which could have been dismissed as just another minor disruption in the frenetic pace of air travel, carried with it the weight of accumulated injustices. Over decades, Sebastian had observed in silence how passengers of color were treated with undue scrutiny, often singled out for reasons as trivial as their choice of seat or the sound of their accent. Today, the security staff's overzealous intervention was not simply an error in protocol, it was a blatant manifestation of a system skewed by prejudice. As Sebastian watched his boarding pass being scrutinized repeatedly, questions swirled in his mind about the policies that had allowed such an incident to occur. Was it routine procedure, or had he been targeted because of who he was? Every detail of this episode was recorded in his memory. From the clinical detachment of the security officers to the subtle smirks of some fellow passengers, every moment was etched with an undeniable sense of injustice. He remembered the compassionate smile of a middle-aged traveler who had offered a silent apology with her eyes, a small act of defiance against an atmosphere tainted by discrimination. Yet, even in that sea of conflicting emotions, Sebastian maintained an air of dignified composure, knowing that outward calm was his most potent weapon against the tides of judgment and scorn. As he was led away from the boarding gate, Sebastian's thoughts turned to the larger battle ahead. His mind, ever calculating and strategic, was already reformulating plans that would shake the very foundations of the airline industry. The public exposure of this incident would, he believed, be a rallying cry for fairness and accountability. Behind the scenes at Cole Global Holdings, confidential discussions were already underway to leverage contractual clauses and financial instruments that controlled significant technological backbones relied upon by Nimbus Air. With a measured resolve, he acknowledged that today's humiliation would serve as the spark for a much larger movement, a quest for justice that would reclaim not just his dignity, but the integrity of air travel itself. Outside, as the doors of the terminal swung open into the bustling city beyond, Sebastian took one last look at the scene he had just left behind. The hum of the airport, the mix of voices both hostile and supportive, all blended into a poignant symphony of modern life, a reminder that every individual moment of resistance held the power to ignite transformative change. With his briefcase held tightly in his hand and his eyes set toward an uncertain future, he stepped into the early London morning, determined to return not with anger, but with an unwavering determination to challenge a system that had long lain dormant in its inequities. In that silent departure, a promise resonated, not only with Sebastian, but with everyone who had borne witness to that fateful moment. It was a promise that even in the face of unyielding adversity, one's dignity must never be forfeit. The echoes of his measured stride would, unbeknownst to him, sow the seeds of a revolution that would redefine the norms of corporate accountability and reshape the narrative around discrimination in one of the world's most prestigious industries. What would you do if you found yourself in Sebastian's shoes, witnessing a system that seemed set in its ways, yet yearning for change? In the hours following his forced departure at Heathrow, an explosive chain reaction began to ripple across the globe. As Sebastian Cole stepped out onto the bustling London streets, his calm exterior concealed the tempest of ideas and emotions swirling within. The video, shot by anonymous bystanders, had already begun its relentless trek across social media platforms, each share and comment amplifying the stark injustice of the situation. Within minutes, what had seemed an isolated incident at an airport transformed into a viral movement, igniting conversations about systemic discrimination in air travel and beyond. The initial online reaction was a blend of shock, outrage, and empathy. Tweets flooded in from passengers, civil rights activists, and even mainstream media outlets denouncing the blatant act of profiling. Hashtags like #StandWithSebastian and #FairFlight began trending, symbolizing a collective refusal to accept discriminatory practices. The raw emotion in user posts conveyed more than just dissatisfaction, they were cries for a long overdue reckoning in an industry where privilege often went unquestioned. For many, Sebastian's dignified response in the face of degradation resonated deeply, as if he had become an unintentional champion for all who had suffered silently. Back at his modest rented flat in London, Sebastian watched the unfolding digital storm with a measured detachment. The soothing hum of his ancient desktop filled the small room as he read message after message from sympathizers and supporters. Yet amid the admiration, there was an undercurrent of calculated resolve. He knew that the incident, however humiliating it initially appeared, had exposed deeply entrenched inequalities, fault lines that had persisted long before his day in the spotlight. Rather than succumb to despair, he allowed the outrage to fuel his determination. Every harsh comment and every heartfelt plea served as an affirmation that the society he yearned to change was ready for reform. Across continents, media outlets scrambled to cover the scandal. In New York, London, and even in distant Asian cities, live broadcasts and impromptu panel discussions dissected the incident with an intensity that few anticipated. Journalists, sharp and relentless, probed the airline's history for similar episodes of mistreatment, unearthing a trail of suppressed complaints and quietly settled cases that spoke to a culture of bias. In a digital meeting room overflowing with graphs and statistical data, a group of aviation analysts prepared a report that outlined a disturbing trend. A disproportionate number of passengers from minority backgrounds had been singled out on flights serviced by Nimbus Air. Their findings, though at an early stage, painted an unsettling portrait of a system skewed by prejudice. Within hours, the cumulative pressure reached the upper echelons of Nimbus Air. Board meetings were convened urgently, conducted in hushed tones as executives scrambled to chart a response. The company's public relations team, already on high alert, drafted statements that were both vague and evasive. However, these attempts at damage control did little to quell the rising tide of public anger. Instead, they further cemented the perception that Nimbus Air was more concerned with preserving its image than addressing the root causes of its discriminatory practices. Whispers of resignations and internal discontent began to circulate among the ranks, sowing seeds of rebellion within the company itself. Sebastian, whose personal investments and technology provided the backbone for a myriad of aviation systems worldwide, understood that the crisis was evolving into a pivotal moment. Rather than retreating into the shadows, as he had so often done in the past, he resolved to harness the momentum of the digital uprising. In confidential meetings with his trusted advisors at Cole Global Holdings, he formulated a bold strategy: use the very network of technology, previously controlled by Nimbus Air and their cohorts, as leverage to enact systemic change. This wasn't merely about retribution, it was about rewriting the rules of engagement in an industry that too long had ignored the call for equity and respect. Late into the night, in a quiet, candlelit study overlooking the Thames, Sebastian penned a statement that would later become a manifesto for change. With a steady hand and a clear purpose, he outlined his vision for an aviation sector that prioritized fairness, transparency, and human dignity. His words were laced with both sorrow and hope: sorrow for the experiences that had driven him into silence all those years ago, and hope for the future that might be born from this crucible of injustice. Every carefully chosen word was a testament to his belief that change, though difficult and disruptive, was not only possible but essential. As dawn broke over London, the first hints of a coordinated response began to coalesce within the corridors of power at Nimbus Air. Senior executives, who once boasted of strict protocols and unwavering customer service, found themselves cornered by the relentless scrutiny of lawmakers, regulators, and the court of public opinion. Insider sources leaked information hinting at internal memos that outlined discriminatory customer profiling practices. Soon, these documents surfaced on independent news websites, adding fuel to the conflagration. With undeniable evidence in hand, activists and legal teams began to explore avenues for class action lawsuits, targeting the very foundations of Nimbus Air's operational ethics. Amidst this corporate maelstrom, Sebastian's own trajectory took an intriguing turn. As he moved through a sea of anonymous voices online, he received a discreet message from an old friend, a veteran pilot turned investigative reporter. The message read simply, "Meet me at the Ivy in Kensington at noon. We have much to discuss." The Ivy, a quaint yet distinguished café known for its intellectual clientele, became the clandestine rendezvous point for those who yearned for a more just aviation industry. Over steaming cups of strong coffee, the reporter and a small group of insiders discussed the emerging trends, pooling together data, personal testimonies from employees, and even some damning internal communications. Every piece of evidence reaffirmed what many had long suspected: Nimbus Air had been operating under a cloud of bias, an affliction that extended from its boarding gates to its boardrooms. By mid-afternoon, the digital revolution had ignited tangible change beyond the realms of social media. A group of prominent civil rights attorneys, inspired by the collective outcry, approached Sebastian with an offer of collaboration. They proposed an investigation that could leverage legal avenues to hold Nimbus Air accountable for its discriminatory practices. With an empathetic yet pragmatic air, Sebastian engaged in discussions, balancing the need for a measured legal strategy with the urgency of public sentiment. He carefully weighed the potential repercussions, knowing that any misstep could plunge the situation into further chaos, yet also recognizing that decisive, principled action was imperative for lasting change. While Nimbus Air's leadership scrambled to quash dissent and recover their fractured reputation, Sebastian's allies in the industry began to look at his actions as the spark for a much broader transformation. Industry conferences, once dominated by hollow platitudes about customer satisfaction and innovation, now featured panels dedicated to ethical reform and diversity in aviation. Academics, regulators, and even former competitors acknowledged the moral imperatives underscored by the incident, contributing to a renewed dialogue about fairness in air travel that spanned continents. Despite the tumult, there remained an undercurrent of personal reflection and resilience for Sebastian. Late that night, on the balcony of his modest flat, he gazed at the shimmering reflections on the Thames. There, among the silvery ripples of water and the distant hum of city life, he allowed himself a quiet moment of introspection. He thought of the many faces he had encountered, the sympathetic glances, the silent nods of solidarity, and even the bitter stares of those unwilling to change. His own past, marked by struggles and small victories against prejudice, came back to him in poignant clarity. Each memory fortified his resolve, reminding him that the journey he had chosen was not a lonely one. It was a path walked by countless souls who had dared to challenge an unjust status quo. As Sebastian prepared for sleep, his mind swam with plans of assembling a task force to further expose and dismantle the systemic inequities in the aviation sector. He envisioned a future where technology and ethical governance intertwined seamlessly to create an environment where every passenger, irrespective of their background, was treated with dignity and respect. The journey ahead was fraught with uncertainty and potential backlash from entrenched interests, but he was no stranger to navigating storms. His determination, tempered by years of quiet perseverance, had finally found its moment to shine. The next morning, as the city of London awakened to a new day suffused with both hope and tension, Sebastian's statement emerged online, resonating deeply with millions across the globe. It wasn't a shout of defiance nor a plea for pity, it was a clear, measured declaration of intent. With every word, he challenged not only Nimbus Air but an entire system that had long marginalized voices like his. His statement encapsulated an unyielding belief in the transformative power of accountability and the promise of a future that respected diversity as a strength rather than a weakness. In a world inundated with noise and cynicism, Sebastian's message was a beacon of resilience and possibility, a call to action that urged individuals to question outdated norms and demand greater equity in every aspect of their lives. It was a reminder that every act of injustice, no matter how subtle, held the potential to catalyze change when met with collective courage and unwavering integrity. What would you do if you witnessed a system unraveling before your eyes? How would you use your voice to turn injustice into an opportunity for a new beginning? In the wake of the digital uproar and media frenzy ignited by Sebastian's ordeal at Heathrow, the atmosphere within Nimbus Air's corporate corridors had shifted from complacency to a palpable state of crisis. As the morning light barely filtered through the boarded-up windows of the once vaunted executive suite, senior management, once haughty and dismissive, now gathered in a dimly lit boardroom with stern expressions and a heavy dose of urgency. The scandal had grown beyond a mere social media outcry, it had become a multifaceted battleground that threatened every aspect of the company's legacy. Inside a sleek, modern conference room far removed from the chaos outside, Nimbus Air's leadership wrestled with the mounting evidence of systemic bias. Confidential internal documents revealing discriminatory policies, along with accounts from disillusioned employees, had cast a long, unshakable shadow over the company's reputation. The board's chairman, a steely veteran named Harold Pembroke, began the meeting with a grave tone. "We are not merely facing a PR disaster," he warned, glancing around at his colleagues whose faces betrayed deep concern. "We are confronted with the fundamental challenge of a system that no longer serves our interests." For Harold and his cohorts, the scramble was on to devise a strategy that could halt the bleeding. Rumors floated of potential executive resignations and board reshuffles, but amid the panic, a more radical plan was taking shape, a plan that would attempt to extinguish the flame of dissent before it reduced the company to ashes. Across town, within the austere confines of a refurbished office in downtown London, Sebastian Cole convened an urgent meeting at Cole Global Holdings Strategic Operations Center. The room buzzed with an air of determined resolve, contrasting starkly with the chaos at Nimbus Air headquarters. In a space dominated by dark wood, illuminated by the soft glow of computer screens, a small team of trusted advisors, comprising legal experts, communication strategists, and influential industry partners, assembled around a long, polished table. Sebastian, seated at the head of the table, radiated a quiet intensity. His eyes, though calm, were blazing with a focus that belied the recent turmoil. "Today, we are not just reacting," he began, his deep voice resonating across the room. "We are proactively defining the future of aviation, one that rejects bias and champions accountability." His words did not merely signal an act of retaliation, they embodied a steadfast commitment to fundamental change. Among those present was Maria Alvarez, a seasoned civil rights attorney with a reputation for uncompromising advocacy. Her sharp, analytical mind had already started piecing together a legal blueprint that could potentially turn the scandal into a catalyst for industry-wide reform. "We have in our possession documents that meticulously detail a pattern of discriminatory practices," Maria asserted, sliding a thick envelope filled with evidence toward Sebastian. "This isn't isolated, and we must harness it to drive systemic accountability, not just at Nimbus Air, but throughout the industry." As Maria detailed the legal ramifications, another advisor, Julian Mercer, an expert in aviation technology, outlined the practical steps for leveraging Cole Global Holdings' influential stake in crucial technological systems that powered many carriers, Nimbus Air included. "Our technology isn't just software," Julian explained, tapping on a digital chart projected onto the screen. "It's the very backbone that allows these airlines to operate safely. We hold a master key. It's not about blackmail, it's about forcing a necessary dialogue on ethical standards in aviation." Throughout the meeting, a careful orchestration of strategy, emotion, and purpose unfurled. Sebastian's plan was methodical. Rather than seeking immediate vengeance, he intended to initiate a controlled dismantling of Nimbus Air's old guard by legally and technologically severing their hold on essential operations. He would challenge the company not merely in the court of public opinion but in the realm of contract law and technology licenses, areas that had long been shielded by corporate power structures. Outside the confines of high-stakes boardrooms, the public narrative was rapidly shifting. Influential voices, from human rights organizations to veteran pilots, began to champion Sebastian's stance as emblematic of a larger fight for justice. Town hall meetings sprang up spontaneously across major cities, where ordinary citizens voiced support for a reformed aviation industry free of systemic discrimination. A notable social media influencer declared, "This is more than a scandal, it's a wake-up call for an industry that prides itself on safety yet fails in ensuring fairness." This groundswell of support provided an unexpected empowerment to Sebastian's circle. At a hushed moment during the strategic operations meeting, he paused and reflected on his own journey, a journey marked by quiet suffering and personal sacrifice that had forged his relentless pursuit of fairness. "I have faced many challenges in silence," he confided softly, his eyes scanning the room. "But the silence of acceptance is no longer an option. Every piece of injustice we uncover is another call to action. We owe it to every person who has ever been wronged, to every voice that has been muted." The conversation shifted to planning the next phase of their counteroffensive. Maria proposed a series of legal measures, including formal complaints to aviation regulatory bodies. Julian outlined technical audits and contingency plans to ensure that if Nimbus Air's system was fully disabled as a result of breaches in ethical standards, alternative safety protocols would seamlessly replace them. "Our objective," he stressed, "is to ensure continuity of safety for passengers while simultaneously forcing the airline to confront its own shortcomings." By the end of the day, the the strategy coalesced into a comprehensive counteroffensive, a multi-pronged approach that coupled legal pressure with a technological standoff. Sebastian's press statement, which was to be released the next morning, promised a future of enhanced transparency and accountability. It was a bold declaration that the era of unchecked corporate privilege was drawing to a close. His carefully chosen words sought not only to expose the past transgressions of Nimbus Air but also to chart a new course for an aviation industry anchored in equality, respect, and unwavering commitment to passenger safety. Over the following hours, the groundwork was set in motion. Legal briefs were drafted, and secure channels of communication were established between Cole Global Holdings and sympathetic regulators. Within the hushed corridors of power, whispers of the Sebastian effect began to circulate, a term that encapsulated the potential for his actions to resonate far beyond one company and precipitate sweeping reform across an entire industry. The ripple effect was already being felt. Investors, shocked by the abrupt downturn in Nimbus Air's stock, began quietly re-evaluating their positions, while competitors discreetly reached out to gauge Sebastian's next moves. Amid these calculated maneuvers, personal reflections intermingled with professional determination. Late in the night, as Sebastian returned to his modest flat overlooking the Thames, he revisited the events of the past days. The city outside was hushed, its familiar cadence momentarily suspended by the gravity of unfolding change. In that solitude, he allowed himself to recall not only his own trials but also the myriad faces of those who had suffered in silence. Each memory, of a kind smile from a fellow traveler, a tearful nod from an employee facing discrimination, served to reinforce his resolve. This was not solely his fight, it was an uprising for all who had long been diminished by a broken system. His determination reached its apex with the drafting of an epilogue that would later be embedded in his press release, a commitment to not only seek justice but to rebuild an industry with new pillars of accountability and care. If our efforts succeed, his statement would declare, then no one, regardless of their background, will ever again have their dignity stripped away at the gate of an airplane. We will rebuild this industry from the inside out, founded on respect, safety, and equal opportunity. As the night deepened, the Strategic Operations Center remained abuzz with activity. Each member of the team, from junior analysts to the most seasoned legal minds, was driven by a shared conviction, a burning desire to usher in a new era. A feeling of unity permeated the room, it was as if the very air vibrated with the promise of imminent change. The plan was set, the legal groundwork laid, and the technological leverage secured. The coming days would decide the fate of Nimbus Air, but one truth was undeniable: Sebastian Cole's counteroffensive was a clarion call for transformation, a declaration that fairness was not negotiable, and that those in power would be held accountable for every injustice. In the midst of these preparations, as the first hints of dawn crept over the horizon, an interactive question echoed softly in the minds of everyone involved: how far are we willing to go to challenge systems built on centuries of prejudice? What would you do when faced with the unyielding forces of discrimination, fight from within or rebuild from the ashes? As the first rays of dawn broke across London, an unexpected stillness hung over the headquarters of Nimbus Air, a silence that was as ominous as it was telling. Deep within the secure confines of their corporate tower in the heart of the city, senior executives gathered again under the shadow of mounting pressure. For the first time in decades, the mighty machine of Nimbus Air was faltering from within as internal dissent and external scrutiny converged into a single, potent force. Inside an imposing boardroom lined with dark wood and polished stone, Harold Pembroke and his closest advisors huddled around a massive conference table. Faces that had once been masked in unwavering confidence now wore signs of anxiety and regret. The legal briefs prepared by external counsel were being read aloud, each page exposing a trove of evidence that unequivocally pointed to discriminatory practices spanning years. Shockingly, some of the confidential internal memos revealed explicit biases in the very protocols that had guided passenger interactions. The old guard's inviolable facade was now crumbling under the weight of irrefutable documentation. One of the seasoned directors, a man named Reginald Price, broke the silence with a tone of bitter resignation. "We built Nimbus Air on the promise of excellence and safety," he intoned, voice heavy with disbelief, yet here we are facing allegations that undermine the very foundation of what we stand for. His remark resonated deeply as others exchanged uneasy glances. There was no denying the truth. Their carefully cultivated image had been shattered by real, systemic issues, and now the public was demanding accountability. Meanwhile, across town at the bustling offices of Cole Global Holdings, Sebastian Cole and his trusted team were preparing to advance their next move. The atmosphere in their strategic operations center was charged with anticipation. Maria Alvarez and Julian Mercer had spent countless hours fine-tuning their legal and technological strategy. Now, with the internal documents from Nimbus Air leaking steadily into the public domain, it was time to act decisively. Sebastian's voice, calm yet resolute, broke the brief silence in the room as he addressed his team. "Our preparations have borne fruit," he said softly, eyes fixed on a digital dashboard streaming live updates from regulatory agencies and media outlets worldwide. "Nimbus Air's negligence is coming to light, and the global community is watching. We must ensure that our next steps pave the way for a transformed industry, one where fairness and safety are not just aspirations, but the norm." In the digital arena, the storm was intensifying. Social media users, civil rights groups, and veteran aviation professionals were amplifying the revelations. Hashtags like #NimbusNoMore and #EqualSkies quickly gained traction, with millions joining in to voice outrage over the abuses documented. The viral dissemination of discriminative policies not only deepened the public's mistrust of Nimbus Air's leadership but also lent momentum to the legal actions being planned. On the regulatory front, a coalition of government watchdogs and consumer rights advocates sprang into action. In parliamentary sessions and press conferences, legislators demanded answers. The Civil Aviation Authority, CAA, announced an immediate inquiry into the airline's internal practices, promising a deep-dive investigation that could lead to severe penalties if proven culpable. Rumors swirled that senior executives, whose names had long been synonymous with the airline's legacy, might soon be summoned to testify before newly convened oversight committees. Within the Nimbus Air boardroom, panic began to seep into every corner. Harold Pembroke's earlier confidence had dissolved into a palpable sense of urgency and desperation. The strategy to contain the crisis, initially designed to buy time and forestall legal actions, was rapidly disintegrating. Executives scrambled to issue clarifications and damage control statements, but every attempt was met with mounting evidence and public skepticism. Internal communication suggested that even some high-ranking employees were contemplating whistleblowing, emboldened by a newfound solidarity and moral imperative. One such voice emerged unexpectedly. A seasoned flight attendant, known to her colleagues as Annette, decided that remaining silent was no longer an option. Late one evening, under cover of anonymity, she uploaded a detailed account of her experiences within Nimbus Air's discriminatory framework to a secure online forum. Her story, a tapestry of moments where passengers had been treated unfairly and colleagues sidelined for questioning discriminatory practices, resonated with hundreds of others. Within hours, her testimony became one of the many building blocks in the emerging narrative of abuse and systemic neglect. Back at Cole Global Holdings, Sebastian's team was now finalizing their statement. Designed to be both a clarion call for change and a meticulous outline of actionable steps, the document was set to go live via multiple media channels at dawn. It emphasized a vision for an aviation industry built upon the principles of transparency, inclusivity, and accountability. Sebastian wrote, "This is not merely an act of corporate counterbalance, it is a commitment to a future where every individual is valued, and every injustice is met with the unwavering resolve to right it." His words, imbued with both empathy and strategic foresight, struck a chord with an audience that was now hungry for substantive change. In a quiet moment before the statement's launch, Sebastian retreated to a private office, where the weight of the day's event settled around him like a shroud. He recalled the countless quiet struggles he had endured, moments of indignity when subtle slights had built into a towering burden over the years. But instead of bitterness, he found a sense of clarity. The early morning sky outside, painted with the delicate hues of impending day, was a silent witness to his renewed purpose. The coordinated effort was not merely a legal or technological maneuver, it was an all-encompassing assault on a system that had thrived on inertia and prejudice. Regulators, media giants, and grassroots activists were all converging on Nimbus Air, each driven by their own stakes in the matter. International partners, who once revered Nimbus Air for its operational efficiencies and service quality, were now distancing themselves, unwilling to be associated with an airline engulfed in scandal. A pivotal moment came when a major international news network broke a story live from outside Nimbus Air's now besieged headquarters. The report featured a montage of internal documents, interviews with former employees, and a rising tide of public protest. Demonstrators clad in vibrant banners and placards chanted slogans demanding justice and reform. It was a scene of collective anger and hope, a visual manifestation of the public's commitment to overturning decades of entrenched discrimination. As the press conference in London began to take shape, Sebastian's statement went live, instantly igniting debates across news outlets and social media platforms. His calm yet potent delivery resonated with millions, reinforcing the notion that this was more than a corporate tussle, it was a fight for human dignity at its core. The media, ever hungry for narratives of transformation, began to label this evolving struggle as the shift, a defining moment in the aviation industry's long history of elitism and bias. In the midst of this unfolding drama, personal stories continued to surface, each one echoing a collective yearning for fairness. A family, separated by unjust boarding policies, shared their harrowing journey of indignity on a widely viewed online video. A young aspiring pilot from an underrepresented background recounted how continuous profiling had nearly extinguished his dreams. Each story added a new layer of urgency and authenticity to the rising chorus against Nimbus Air. From his modest flat overlooking the Thames, Sebastian listened intently as the unfolding events were broadcast live. The transformation of public sentiment from outrage to proactive demand for reform filled him with a resolute hope. He realized that the dismantling of an outdated and discriminatory system was no longer an abstract ideal, it was happening in real time, propelled by the unified voices of the disenfranchised. The plan was now set to make history. As legal challenges were filed and internal restructuring at Nimbus Air loomed inevitable, a question emerged, a question that encapsulated the tension and promise of this pivotal moment: how far will established institutions go to cling to power when faced with an unstoppable force demanding justice? As the day drew to a close, the boardroom of Nimbus Air remained a silent battlefield of missed opportunities and mounting regrets. In stark contrast, the vibrant corridors of Cole Global Holdings pulsed with the promise of a new era. Their collective actions were no longer aimed at retribution alone, they were an earnest effort to create an aviation landscape where safety, fairness, and respect were more than corporate buzzwords, they were the foundation of every flight, every policy, and every interaction. What would you be willing to sacrifice to stand up against an entrenched system? How far would you go to transform injustice into an opportunity for lasting change? As the dust of public outrage and corporate infighting began to settle, a palpable shift stirred both within and beyond the fractured walls of Nimbus Air. In the wake of mounting legal challenges and a relentless media storm, the time had come for a radical transformation, a metamorphosis that would not only dismantle an entrenched system but also lay the foundation for an industry renewed by fairness, accountability, and innovation. In a sleek, glass-walled conference room far removed from the oppressive boardrooms of old Nimbus Air, a new leadership team was gathering at Cole Global Holdings Operations Center. The atmosphere was charged with determination and a shared vision, a future in which every decision would be guided not by self-interest and antiquated policies, but by a fervent commitment to social justice and ethical business practices. At the head of the table sat Sebastian Cole, whose calm intensity and quiet resolve had, over the past days, transformed him into a beacon of hope for countless individuals who had long suffered the consequences of systemic discrimination. Sebastian's eyes swept across the room, taking in the familiar faces of advisors, legal strategists, and visionary technologists who had stood with him since the fateful day at Heathrow. Today, they faced a challenge greater than any they had encountered before: the task of reimagining an entire industry from the ground up. The plan was no longer simply about holding an airline accountable for its past transgressions, it was about redefining the standards, ethics, and operating principles of commercial aviation on a global scale. Today, Sebastian began in a measured tone that belied the enormity of what was unfolding. We embark on a journey to rebuild not just a company, but an entire paradigm. For too long, deep-seated biases have dictated who gets to fly, who gets respect, and who is allowed to succeed. Our objective is to create a system where dignity is given as much weight as profit margins, a system in which technology, transparency, and inclusive human values converge to serve every passenger. As his words reverberated around the room, Maria Alvarez, the fearless civil rights attorney whose meticulous work had unearthed damning evidence of past abuses, interjected with a fervor that underscored the gravity of the moment. "We have already seen the tide turning," she said. "Investors are pulling out of Nimbus Air, regulators are demanding accountability, and public sentiment is unequivocally on our side. Now is the time to harness this momentum, enforce comprehensive industry reforms, and build a new model of aviation that our society desperately needs." Her words resonated deeply with every member present. Julian Mercer, the technology expert who had demonstrated how Cole Global Holding Systems powered much of the aviation world, added, "Our technological leverage is not just a bargaining chip, it's the catalyst for change. Imagine an integrated system that not only optimizes flight operations but also ensures that every algorithm is free from human bias. That's what we're aiming to create, an aviation ecosystem that runs on data, integrity, and fairness." Outside the safe confines of Cole Global Holdings Operations Center, the repercussions of Nimbus Air's collapse were already rippling across the industry. Regulatory bodies around the world, spurred on by insistent public demand, launched comprehensive audits of airline practices, scrutinizing everything from recruitment policies to customer service protocols. The Civil Aviation Authority, CAA, in London was one of the first to declare that any airline failing to adhere to newly stipulated ethical guidelines would face severe penalties, including the revocation of essential technology licenses. Amidst this turbulent backdrop, former Nimbus Air employees, emboldened by the wave of change, began to step forward with stories of past injustices. Their testimonies, once silenced by fear and corporate pressure, now roared like a powerful symphony demanding reform. An array of heartfelt accounts emerged. Long-serving cabin crew members recalled moments when discrimination dictated their career trajectories, talented pilots recounted being bypassed in promotions solely because of their backgrounds, and everyday passengers shared their own experiences of being treated as second-class citizens in the realm of air travel. The power of these voices culminated in a massive public rally held in Trafalgar Square, a spontaneous gathering of individuals united by the belief that every person deserved the dignity of safe and respectful travel. Hundreds of demonstrators, holding placards emblazoned with messages like "Equal Skies for All" and "No More Discrimination," chanted in unison, their unified spirit echoing across the city. Media cameras swiveled to capture every moment of that electrifying display, a moment that marked the irreversible end of an era defined by exclusivity and inequity. Back in London, as the new day dawned, Sebastian's team finalized the details of a sweeping press conference that would formally announce their ambitious proposal for a complete industry overhaul. This wasn't merely an act of corporate strategy, it was a commitment to a future where the flight path of every human being was unimpeded by prejudice. The statement meticulously outlined plans for a robust regulatory framework, partnerships with global human rights organizations, and the deployment of unbiased technological systems that would serve as the backbone of this new model. The announcement was scheduled for a prime-time slot on a major international network, a moment when millions would witness, firsthand, the audacity of the transformation taking place. As Sebastian stood at the podium, his eyes reflecting both resolve and compassion, he addressed a sea of reporters and cameras with a conviction that stirred hearts and minds alike. "This is more than a corporate pivot," he declared, his voice resonant and unwavering. "It is a call to action, a demand that every airline, every regulatory body, and indeed every member of our society must play their part in ensuring that the skies are truly open to all, free from the shackles of discrimination. Today, we begin the process of rebuilding an industry that has long exploited the vulnerabilities of its most marginalized passengers. We are not here to simply right past wrongs, we are here to innovate, to integrate, and to inspire a future where human dignity is the true measure of success. The echoes of his address reverberated across continents. News outlets in New York, Singapore, and Sydney swiftly picked up on his transformative message, turning the tide from scandal to hope. Within hours, social media exploded with support under hashtags like #NewSkiesNow and #EqualAirways, signifying that a new chapter was indeed dawning in the world of aviation. Amid the whirlwind of change, there remained a distinctly personal element to Sebastian's journey. Later that evening, as he stepped onto his modest balcony overlooking the glittering Thames, he allowed himself a rare moment of introspection. In the gentle solitude of that quiet space, memories of his own battles against prejudice, a lifetime of silent struggles and small triumphs, merged with the promise of what was to come. Each flickering light in the city below seemed to represent a soul ready to embrace a future unburdened by injustice. In that reflective moment, he reached for his phone and sent a brief, heartfelt message to his closest confidant: the future is not built on the remnants of shattered institutions, but on the courage to rebuild from the ground up. His message was simple, yet it carried a profound truth, a truth that inspired his colleagues, his supporters, and countless others witnessing the birth of this new era. As the preparations for the press conference continued to unfold with meticulous precision, a single, thought-provoking question remained at the forefront of Sebastian's mind, a question that he intended for his audience to ponder long after his words faded from the screen. What legacy will you choose to forge when faced with the opportunity to redefine the world around you? How would you rise above long-standing prejudices to build a legacy of equality and justice? In the days that followed the momentous press conference, a palpable excitement and transformation began to permeate not only the corridors of Cole Global Holdings but also the entire global aviation landscape. As dawn broke over London with hints of possibility, the stage was set for the grand unveiling of a revolutionary venture, New Sky Airways, a bold initiative conceived to redefine air travel from its very foundations. Overnight, the airwaves buzzed with the promise of transformation. Financial markets, long jittery from the cascading fallout at Nimbus Air, now witnessed a glimmer of hope as investors and industry insiders took note of the emerging paradigm shift. The momentum had reached a fever pitch. Discussions of ethical reform, technological advancements, and inclusive leadership were no longer confined to boardrooms or isolated social media threads, they had ignited a worldwide dialogue. At the heart of this emerging movement, Sebastian Cole and his inner circle worked relentlessly. Their meticulous preparations were culminating in the launch event of New Sky Airways, scheduled for a highly publicized ceremony at a repurposed aviation facility in East London. This venue, once a symbol of an outdated era of exclusivity and opaque dealings, was now reimagined into a vibrant hub of innovation and diversity. The repurposing of the space was both symbolic and strategic, a physical representation of the change that was sweeping through the industry. In the weeks leading up to the launch, every detail was scrutinized and perfected. Festooned with modern architectural elements and open concept design, the facility was prepared to host dignitaries, media representatives, civil rights activists, and curious citizens alike. Banners emblazoned with the new emblem of New Sky Airways, an abstract, soaring design interwoven with motifs of unity and progress, were raised for all to see. At its core, the emblem symbolized a promise, that the skies would no longer be a domain where prejudice took flight, but rather a space of boundless opportunity for all. On the morning of the launch, the atmosphere was electric. Outside the venue, a diverse crowd assembled in anticipation, reflecting not only the support for the new venture but also an earnest desire for change. Ordinary passengers mingled with industry experts and activists, smiles of determination and hope were exchanged in every corner. Among them was a young woman in a pilot's uniform, her eyes shining with pride, a living embodiment of the new era that New Sky Airways promised to usher in. Inside the venue, the main hall had been transformed into a panoramic theater where history and future converged. Giant screens displayed a montage of images that chronicled the journey from injustice to innovation, poignant footage of the controversial incident at Heathrow, heartfelt testimonies from those who had suffered under discriminatory practices, and, finally, dynamic clips of the team working behind the scenes to build a safer, fairer aviation future. These visuals set the tone for a launch not merely about a new airline, but about a revolutionary rethinking of what air travel could and should be. Sebastian Cole took to the stage amidst a swell of applause and eager anticipation. He paused for a moment, drawing in the collective breath of the audience as he prepared to speak, a speech that would become emblematic of this new chapter. His tone was measured yet infused with unbridled passion. Today, he began, looking out at the sea of faces that span generations, cultures, and industries, we redefine what it means to soar. No longer will the boundaries of prejudice tether our dreams. We are here to construct a future where every passenger, every employee, every individual can access the skies free from discrimination, a future where every journey is taken not just with safety, but with dignity and respect. As his words echoed through the hall, Sebastian outlined the principles that would guide New Sky Airways. Foremost was an unwavering commitment to ethical governance. The new airline would not only implement cutting-edge collision prevention and navigation systems powered by unbiased, transparent algorithms, but it would also institute a radical overhaul of its hiring practices. Every recruitment, from flight crew to maintenance teams, would prioritize inclusivity, ensuring that the workforce truly represented the diverse tapestry of global society. He detailed how partnerships had already been forged with renowned human rights organizations and regulatory bodies committed to fostering accountability and fairness. "We are not just launching an airline," he declared. "We are launching an era of transparency, where technology is wielded as a tool for equality, and every data point, every decision, is open to scrutiny for the betterment of all." The speech was interspersed with personal reflections from employees who had risen from the margins of a broken system. A mid-career flight attendant recounted, with quiet intensity, her experiences of being passed over for promotions and how she'd longed for an opportunity to work somewhere that valued her expertise and character over preconceived biases. A young engineer shared the inspiration he felt in witnessing an industry-wide reassessment, a chance not only to rebuild systems but to reinvent lives. Their voices, sincere and heartfelt, lent a human dimension to the bold technological vision being presented. Simultaneously, the New Sky Airways team unveiled innovative technological breakthroughs that promised to recalibrate the very mechanics of flight safety. Live demonstrations showcased real-time data streams, underscoring how artificial intelligence had been refined to eliminate human biases in predicting maintenance needs and preventing potential flight hazards. These displays resonated deeply with the audience, merging the emotional drive for equality with the pragmatic demands of safety and efficiency in the skies. A palpable feeling of unity and resolve filled the room as the launch event transitioned into an interactive Q&A session. Journalists peppered Sebastian and his executives with probing questions, ranging from specific details about the new safety protocols to broader inquiries about the regulatory frameworks that would enforce these changes across the industry. Each answer was delivered with a combination of analytical precision and heartfelt commitment, reflecting a leader who had personally experienced humiliation and was now determined to transform that pain into the fuel for a global movement. As the event drew to a close, the final segment of the launch featured a stirring musical tribute, a live performance that fused classical strings with modern electronic beats, symbolizing the harmonious convergence of tradition and innovation. The ambience was electric, as if the very air vibrated with the hope of a better tomorrow. The audience, moved by the presentation and emboldened by the shared vision, rose to their feet in a standing ovation that reverberated far beyond the confines of the hall. Later that evening, as the crowd slowly dispersed into the night, social media buzzed with electric enthusiasm. Hashtags like #NewHorizonsAir, #SkyForAll, and #EqualFlight trended worldwide, encapsulating the sentiment of a global community ready to embrace a more just future in aviation. Opinions poured in, stories of personal transformation, impassioned calls for systemic reform, and pledges of support from unlikely allies in industries far removed from air travel. The digital sphere was alight with hope and possibility. In the quiet moments that followed the public festivities, Sebastian found solace on a secluded balcony overlooking the city. The cool night air carried whispers of distant dreams, each star in the sky a symbolic beacon for those daring enough to challenge the status quo. In the solitude of that reflective space, he pondered the road ahead, aware that transformative change was never linear, that the dismantling of deeply entrenched systems would require continued courage, resilience, and collective effort. Yet, for the first time in a long while, he allowed himself a small smile, a silent acknowledgement that the courage of the human spirit could indeed reshape the world. As the night deepened, a final interactive question emerged, inviting everyone to reflect on their role in this historic change. How will you contribute to a world where fairness guides every journey, and each step we take in the sky lifts us all toward a brighter, more inclusive future? In the weeks that followed the triumphant launch of New Sky Airways, the landscape of global aviation underwent seismic shifts. Across continents, a powerful tug-of-war emerged between the established old guard and a burgeoning coalition driven by a vision of fairness and accountability. As regulatory inquiries deepened and shareholder confidence wavered, the collision between legacy institutions and a transformative movement accelerated into a full-blown reckoning. At the heart of this turbulent period were the legal battles unfolding in courtrooms and boardrooms alike. While regulators and human rights groups meticulously sifted through internal documents from Nimbus Air, high-profile lawsuits were being drafted that accused long-standing airlines of systemic discrimination. The legal teams representing these lawsuits were relentless, determined to expose decades of neglect and bias. In a landmark hearing held in a cavernous London courthouse, a panel of judges listened intently as former employees recounted their experiences of humiliation, unequal treatment, and unjust dismissals. Their testimonies were interwoven with testimonies from passengers who had been sidelined or degraded by callous policies. The collective voice of the oppressed resonated like thunder in the halls of justice, marking a public turning point that few could ignore. Meanwhile, on the corporate side, Nimbus Air's dwindling stock and the internal rumors of high-ranking resignations created an atmosphere of palpable uncertainty. The once mighty airline was now a house of cards built on precarious contracts and ethical oversights. During a tense emergency board meeting, Harold Pembroke and his executive team wrestled with the escalating crisis. In a desperate attempt to reclaim some semblance of control, they deliberated strategies aimed at deflecting legal pressure and restoring investor confidence. However, every proposal was met with skepticism, both from within the company and by external analysts who saw nothing but the crumbling edifice of a system built on exclusion. Over in the operations center at Cole Global Holdings, Sebastian Cole and his advisors were preparing to launch their next phase, a comprehensive regulatory proposal designed to reframe the entire aviation landscape. Detailed in a sprawling 300-page document, the proposal outlined a multi-layered plan to enforce ethical standards, from binding transparency clauses on algorithmic decision-making to mandatory diversity benchmarks for all airline staff. The document was a masterclass in strategic foresight, balancing legal precision with moral urgency. Sebastian's calm yet firm narration in the subsequent press briefing struck a resonant chord, positioning his initiative not merely as a response to scandal but as a blueprint for global reform. "We are at the crossroads of history," he declared. "The choices made today will decide whether our skies remain a playground for the privileged or transform into a sanctuary of equality." Parallel to these high-stake negotiations, a groundswell of public engagement continued to gain momentum. Social media and citizen journalism played a critical role in amplifying every development. Thousands of live streams captured courtroom testimonies and boardroom crises in real time. Influential activists and thought leaders, ranging from noted legal experts to celebrated humanitarians, joined forces to host virtual town halls, discussing how the ripple effects of these events were reshaping not only the policies of air travel but the broader discourse on civil rights and corporate ethics. The hashtag Reset the Skies became the rallying cry for a movement that demanded transparency and accountability, urging all industries to recalibrate their core values. Amid this fervor of progress, tensions simmered on every front. In quiet cafes and crowded offices, debates arose over the ideal approach to reform. Some argued that dismantling the old system entirely was necessary, while others believed in transforming it from within by introducing incremental changes. This internal struggle was personal as well as professional, with veteran employees coming to terms with decades of entrenched practices that had defined their careers. For many, the paradigm shift offered a bittersweet validation of long-suppressed frustrations, a testament to the idea that enduring change often comes from breaking the silence and demanding a reimagined future. One particularly poignant moment unfolded in a suburban courtroom in Manchester, where a former Nimbus Air employee, once sidelined for courageously speaking out against discriminatory practices, took the stand. Her testimony was both powerful and raw, detailing the subtle but pervasive ways in which bias had shaped her daily work life. Every shift felt like a battle against an invisible enemy, she recalled, her voice trembling with both sorrow and resolve. I was expected to smile and serve, even when I was treated as an inferior being. Today, I stand here not just for myself but for every person who has ever been silenced. Her words were met with a brief, charged silence before the courtroom erupted in support. It was moments like these that redefined the conflict, not simply as a legal confrontation, but as a profound, human struggle for justice. In the background of these unfolding dramas, the technological underpinnings of New Sky Airways provided both hope and a formidable counterbalance to corporate malfeasance. Engineers and data scientists worked around the clock to ensure that every safety protocol was imbued with fairness and unbiased judgment. Advanced artificial intelligence systems were recalibrated to monitor not only flight operations but also to audit human decisions in real time. Julian Mercer, the technology expert and one of the architects of these systems, frequently underscored the revolutionary nature of their work during industry seminars. This isn't just about airplanes, he explained to a packed auditorium. It's about building systems that reflect the true ethos of humanity, a world where technology serves as an impartial guardian of safety and equality. Across the board, concerted efforts to unify disparate voices were yielding fruit. Coalition groups composed of former industry insiders, progressive policymakers, and grassroots activists mobilized swiftly to demand that all legacy airlines adopt similar measures for reform. This cross-sector alliance was not limited to rhetoric, it was buttressed by concrete commitments. Major airlines in Europe and North America began to announce internal reviews of their practices, promising to overhaul discriminatory policies if systemic reforms were not promptly implemented. This widespread acknowledgement marked the beginning of an era where accountability was not an option but a necessity. The media, ever vigilant in this rapidly evolving saga, captured every moment of the mounting tension. Investigative reports detailed the financial, legal, and moral domino effects triggered by the scandal. International news outlets pounded on the narrative that old institutions were crumbling under the weight of their own misdeeds, while new pioneers, like New Sky Airways, offered a vision of redemption, a future recalibrated by rigorous ethical standards and empathetic governance. In a quiet yet resolute moment before closing another day of relentless strategy sessions, Sebastian retreated to a private study. There, he reflected on the journey that had led to this critical juncture, from a single, defining moment of humiliation at Heathrow to a movement that now demanded global transformation. In that solitude, the significance of his role crystallized. It was not just a battle for market share or corporate survival, it was a fight for the soul of an industry that touched millions of lives every day. And in that realization lay the strength to press forward, no matter the obstacles. As dusk set in over London, painting the sky with soft hues that belied the turbulent fight beneath, a final interactive question echoed among the advocates of change. What price would you pay to dismantle an unjust system and create a future where every journey is a testament to fairness and respect? How far would you push for a world where legacy no longer overshadows the promise of equality? What do you believe is the most critical step toward ensuring accountability in systems that have long ignored the voices of the marginalized? As the legal battles intensified and boardroom power struggles threatened to upend the status quo, the determined pioneers of New Sky Airways began laying the groundwork for a legacy that would outlast fleeting headlines. In a world now awakened to the call for systemic change, it was no longer enough to merely disrupt an entrenched system, the movement needed to build an entirely new framework anchored in ethical governance, innovative technology, and genuine inclusion. In a state-of-the-art facility newly established near London's financial district, a diverse team of engineers, legal experts, human rights advocates, and former airline professionals worked in synergy. The facility, with its transparent glass walls and open-plan offices, was emblematic of a new era. Here, information was shared openly, and every decision was subject to rigorous scrutiny, a stark contrast to the secretive corridors of power that had long shrouded legacy airlines. At the helm of this transformative effort was Sebastian Cole. Over the past months, he had evolved from a quiet visionary into a charismatic leader whose every action resonated with a deep personal commitment to justice. Now, more than ever, his presence was felt not just in board meetings and press conferences, but in every facet of the new initiative. His morning briefings were punctuated with real stories of change, a pilot from an underrepresented background narrating how new training programs had opened a door for him, or a cabin crew member sharing how revamped customer care protocols restored her faith in the industry. Maria Alvarez, the civil rights attorney whose work had helped expose the dark underbelly of systemic discrimination in air travel, led the legal arm of the reform. She spearheaded a groundbreaking charter that proposed binding, enforceable standards across all stakeholders. This charter would ensure that every airline, new and old, would be held accountable for maintaining an environment where bias was meticulously weeded out from operational protocols, hiring practices, and customer engagement. Her approach was both technical and humane, grounded in solid legal theory and propelled by countless personal stories of injustice. In one particularly moving roundtable discussion, she recounted the tale of a long-silent whistleblower whose brave testimony had catalyzed policy changes. Her words electrified the audience, reinforcing the belief that every story mattered. Meanwhile, Julian Mercer and his team of technology experts integrated advanced artificial intelligence with transparent algorithms, establishing a digital monitoring system. This system was designed to constantly audit every phase of flight operations, from pre-flight screenings to real-time maintenance checks. The goal was to eliminate hidden biases embedded in legacy systems by replacing them with protocols that relied purely on data and ethical standards. Julian would often say that technology should be the great equalizer. His team's efforts were aimed at ensuring that no human factor, no matter how subconscious, could taint the sanctity of flight safety and service excellence. Public engagement reached unprecedented levels as New Sky Airways rolled out an extensive digital outreach program. This initiative allowed passengers to provide real-time feedback on every aspect of their journey, guaranteeing that their voices directly influenced policy and operational adjustments. Online platforms buzzed with interactive sessions, webinars, and live Q&As where individuals shared suggestions, recounted personal experiences, and even participated in the iterative design of new safety protocols. It was a digital town hall where the demand for accountability transformed into actionable insight. As regulatory bodies around the world began to adopt many of the sweeping recommendations championed by Sebastian and his team, legacy carriers were forced to confront the rapid pace of reform. In strategic meetings and industry summits, whispers of the New Sky model became a rallying cry, a standard that promised to reshape not only aviation but other sectors mired in similar discriminatory practices. Investors, noticing the shifting winds of public opinion and enhanced corporate governance, started to gravitate toward initiatives that emphasized transparency and ethical leadership. The shockwaves from Nimbus Air's collapse had spread far and wide, ensuring that the fight for equity in the skies was now a global imperative. Yet, the journey was far from smooth. Old institutional habits have long inertia, and remnants of the past continued to resist change. Protests erupted in boardrooms where some executives clung to outdated policies. In a dramatic televised interview, an ex-Nimbus Air executive, visibly shaken by the new tide of accountability, admitted, "We underestimated the power of the people, and the power of technology when it's wielded with integrity." His words, though reluctant, encapsulated the crumbling certainty of an old guard that had once seemed unassailable. For Sebastian, every obstacle was a reminder of the struggles he had faced at Heathrow and the years of silent suffering that had fueled his passion for reform. Late at night, when the facility's lights dimmed and the hum of computers grew soft, he often found solace in the quiet reflection of personal history. He revisited old photographs, a reminder of the young man who had once been dismissed and degraded because of who he was. Now, those memories transformed into the foundation of a new legacy. They were not just scars, they were badges of honor that spurred him on to create a future where every journey was defined by respect, dignity, and equality. This new legacy was not meant to be the work of one man alone. It was the culmination of collective energy, a tapestry woven from the determination of countless unsung heroes. It was a legacy built on dialogue, accountability, and a commitment to continuous improvement. As New Sky Airways prepared to begin its inaugural flights, accompanied by a series of mentoring and community programs designed to empower those who had long been marginalized, the industry, and indeed the world, watched with bated breath. A final press release, crafted with both visionary optimism and pragmatic detail, announced that the first transatlantic flight under the New Sky banner would take off in 30 days. The release detailed revamped safety protocols, an inclusive recruitment drive, and a partnership with leading human rights organizations, all reinforcing the new vision for aviation. It was a clarion call, not just for a new airline, but for a new era in which accountability and ethical behavior were no longer optional but fundamental. As the day of the inaugural flight approached, amidst a swirl of celebratory chatter and cautious optimism, Sebastian addressed his team one last time before the final countdown. "We are not merely launching an airline," he said, his voice resonating with quiet authority, "we are setting a precedent. What we build today will echo in the generations of travelers, employees, and leaders who come after us. Let our work be remembered not for its grandeur, but for its unwavering commitment to justice." In that decisive moment, the movement that began with a single act of defiance had morphed into a revolution, a systematic overhaul that promised to repair, rebuild, and reinvigorate an industry long tarnished by discrimination. The new legacy was in motion, built on technology, law, and most importantly, the human spirit. And as New Sky Airways readied itself to soar, each member of the movement was left to ponder one final, interactive question. What do you believe is the most essential value that should guide every step we take toward building a future of genuine equality? How will you ensure that the legacy you help create remains steadfast in the face of both adversity and the temptations of the past? In the months following the inaugural transatlantic flight of New Sky Airways, the revolution that had been seeded by a single moment of defiance at Heathrow had ripened into something far more profound, a reimagined aviation landscape that now stretched across continents, touching lives both inside and outside the boardrooms of legacy carriers. The once fragmented movement had matured into an undeniable force, one that fundamentally redefined the intersection of technology, law, and human decency in air travel. As New Sky Airways consistently recorded record-breaking passenger satisfaction scores and soaring operational safety statistics, its impact rippled well beyond the terminals and tarmacs. This new venture had become a lodestar for reform-minded innovators across industries who saw in it a model for ethical transformation. Within New Sky's transparent headquarters, bustling with diverse voices and marked by cutting-edge technology, the spirit of inclusion was not an aspirational slogan. It was a lived, daily reality. On a crisp spring morning in London, as sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows of a modernized control center, Sebastian Cole met with an international consortium of regulators, human rights advocates, and technology leaders. Their goal was nothing short of rewriting the standard playbook for commercial aviation. The meeting was a strategic summit, its atmosphere heavy with purpose and the unspoken understanding that what was at stake was the very future of air travel. Detailed presentations on revamped recruitment policies, unbiased algorithmic operations, and comprehensive oversight mechanisms underscored the coalition's resolve to eradicate the remnants of discriminatory legacy. Sebastian, standing before an international audience via live digital broadcast, spoke with a confidence born of both personal sacrifice and unwavering determination. "Today," he said, his gaze steadfast and inviting, "we have not only demonstrated that a better way is possible, we have set forth the blueprint for an industry where equity and safety are inextricably linked. Our efforts extend beyond our flights, they reach into every community touched by travel. Together, we are reshaping not merely the sky above us, but the very culture of our society. His words resonated globally. In cities from New York to Singapore, grassroots organizations and forward-thinking corporations embraced the New Sky model as a rallying cry for similar reforms in their sectors. Airlines that had long been entrenched in old practices were forced to open their books to scrutiny, while investment firms began reallocating resources to favor those who adhered to the new ethical benchmarks. The rapid pivot was not without challenges. The legacy carriers had amassed deep networks of power and influence, and their struggle to adapt was visible in plummeting market shares and mounting regulatory penalties. Meanwhile, on the technological frontier, Julian Mercer's team had accelerated development on an innovative digital dashboard that meticulously monitored every phase of flight operations, from takeoff to landing, with an unprecedented level of transparency. This dashboard, a marvel of data integration and unbiased algorithmic oversight, provided real-time insights into maintenance performance, crew decision-making, and passenger feedback. Through a series of interactive modules accessible to regulators and the public alike, it became possible to trace every safety protocol back to its source, ensuring that no lapse went unnoticed and that every anomaly was met with rapid, corrective action. Maria Alvarez continued her relentless work on the legal front, reinforcing the new charter that established stringent anti-discrimination measures in aviation. In collaborative sessions with international legal experts, she fine-tuned proposals that not only penalized discriminatory behavior but rewarded companies for demonstrable progress in diversity and inclusion. Her efforts culminated in a historic agreement among several key nations, promising that any airline operating within their jurisdictions would need to meet these newly established ethical standards. The new legal framework was celebrated as a turning point, a legislative milestone that turned a powerful collective cry for justice into binding, enforceable action. Public sentiment, too, had evolved. The once skeptical bystanders and humiliated passengers now found an active voice. Community outreach programs and educational initiatives, launched by New Sky Airways in collaboration with local governments, helped demystify the technological and regulatory changes that were reshaping the aviation industry. Workshops were held in schools, and scholarships were provided to young innovators from marginalized communities, ensuring that the new era would be staffed by those whose talents and dreams had too long been overlooked. Stories of personal triumph, of individuals finding opportunities in the midst of systemic change, became part of a broader narrative of empowerment and shared success. On a warm summer evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon over the River Thames, a celebratory event was hosted at New Sky's flagship terminal. The event was part of an ongoing Sky for All campaign, which celebrated the convergence of technology, justice, and human dignity. Families, industry veterans, activists, and even former critics gathered to witness a symbolic unveiling, a monument dedicated to the journey from injustice to transformation. The sculpture, a dynamic fusion of metal and glass that captured the motion of wings in flight, became a powerful metaphor for the aspiration to rise above old limitations, to build a future defined by possibility and respect. During the event, diverse voices took the stage. A young pilot, whose career had been reinvigorated by inclusive training programs, recounted in measured tones how she had once believed that the skies were reserved only for a select few, only to have her perceptions forever altered by the new policies that valued talent over appearance. An elderly passenger, who had suffered years of being treated with disdain at legacy airlines, expressed his heartfelt gratitude at finally feeling seen and respected. Even a representative from a legacy carrier, previously so entrenched in defiance, stepped forward to acknowledge that the tectonic shift they had resisted was now undeniable. His rare admission, filled with a mix of humility and a cautiously optimistic hope for the future, underscored the magnitude of the transformation that had swept across the industry. In a series of live Q&A sessions streamed to millions around the world, Sebastian answered probing questions about future plans, the sustainability of the new regulations, and the potential for these reforms to spread to other sectors. His thoughtful, measured responses not only reassured stakeholders but also kindled discussions on how technology and inclusive governance might be applied to challenges beyond aviation, spanning healthcare, education, and public administration. The dialogue was vibrant and reflective, inviting every viewer to consider their own role in the collective effort to create more equitable systems. As the festivities drew to a close and the crowd dispersed under the starlit sky, a quiet sense of hopeful determination lingered in the air, a testament to the enduring belief that change, however slow or complex, was not only possible but already underway. The relentless march of progress had begun to erase the dark stains of past discrimination, replacing them with the luminous promise of a future built on shared values and equal opportunity. At that moment, as New Sky Airways prepared to schedule its next series of transformative initiatives and as policymakers around the world began to integrate its ethos into broader regulatory frameworks, an interactive question was posed to the global community, one that encapsulated the spirit of the times and invited every individual to contribute to the legacy of change. What legacy will you choose to create in a world redefined by justice and innovation? How can your unique voice and actions help ensure that every journey, whether in the skies or on the ground, is navigated with fairness, transparency, and respect? Your thoughts and actions today have the power to echo in the halls of tomorrow's history. What steps will you take to shape a future where accountability and equality are not aspirations, but everyday realities? As the final chapter of this transformative journey draws to a close, we invite you to pause and reflect on the resounding message that has united us all. This isn't just a story about airlines or corporate reforms, it's a narrative of human resilience, the power of unity, and the unwavering belief that every one of us deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. From the bitter moments of injustice to the inspiring vision of a future reimagined, every step of this journey was driven by a love for humanity and an unyielding commitment to create a world where equality is the norm, not the exception. Let this be a reminder that change begins with each one of us. Every act of compassion, every stand against discrimination, and every moment of bravery can lift us all closer to a future where every journey, whether in the skies or on the ground, is embraced with warmth and fairness. This transformation is a collective effort, a tapestry woven with our shared dreams, our resilient spirits, and the belief that our differences make us stronger when celebrated. Thank you for joining us on this remarkable voyage. We hope this story has not only inspired you but also ignited a spark of hope and determination in your heart. Remember, the skies belong to all of us, and together, we can create a legacy filled with love, unity, and boundless possibility. If you found this journey moving and transformative, please consider subscribing to our channel. Your support helps us continue to share stories that challenge our world, spark dialogue, and inspire positive change. Thank you for watching, and together, let's soar toward a brighter tomorrow. Subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories.